Since the early 1950s, the Soviet government had been trying to establish mass production of affordable passenger cars. In 1955, the new Moskvich 402 was released. Although it was classified as a budget car for ordinary citizens, it was still unaffordable for many Soviet workers. This prompted the government to look for new solutions, including the development of modern microcars and motorized tricycles. As a result, several prototype models were created, such as the NAMI 031, NAMI 059, IMZ A50 Belka, and GAZ-18, but none of them passed the evaluation and received approval for mass production. The government was not interested in spending years on careful development and large investments. It was much easier to take an existing foreign car and adapt it for local needs, popularity in Europe. The task was assigned to engineers at the Moscow automotive plant, and in 1957, the prototype Moskvich 444 was presented. It was equipped with an engine from the Soviet Ural motorcycle, manual window cranks, and 13-inch wheels. However, since the Moscow plant was already operating at near full capacity, and its management wasn't enthusiastic about the new small car, the government decided to find another production site. The choice fell on the Kommunar factory in Zaporizhzhia, which had previously specialized in agricultural machinery. After receiving the design documentation and equipment from Moscow, the plant was restructured into an automobile factory. The first prototype under the name ZAZ-965 Zaporozhets was presented in 1959. Its main difference from the Moskvich was the engine. Specifically for this car, the Soviet Automotive Research Institute NAMI developed a V-shaped four-cylinder engine with a displacement of 746 cubic centimeters. Unlike most small cars of the time, it wasn't an inline four. It was a V4 and air-cooled. This engine turned out to be bulkier than the ones used in the Moskvich and the Fiat 600. Because of its size, it had to be mounted in the rear, which resulted in a distinctive hump on the back and earned the car its nickname, Gorbati, or affectionately, Gorby. Mass production officially began in 1960, with a starting price of 18,000 pre-reform rubles. Gorby went into production after only limited testing, and many issues identified during trials were never resolved. The reason? A well-known Soviet tradition. Major industrial achievements were often rushed to meet the deadlines of important party events. Development and production were accelerated, sometimes at the expense of reliability. It's hard to blame the engineers. They were working under pressure. As a result, the Zaporozhets entered the market while still very much unrefined. Initial feedback from customers was mixed. The car was praised for its compact size and low price, but criticized for excessive noise, vibrations, poor handling, and questionable reliability. The biggest weakness was the engine. The air-cooled V4 was extremely noisy and unstable in operation. It tended to overheat in summer and was nearly impossible to warm up properly in winter. In late 1962, the engine was redesigned. Cylinder bore was increased to 72 millimeters, displacement to 887 cubic centimeters, and power output rose to 27 horsepower. Unfortunately, this did not resolve the overheating or noise issues. Even so, many Soviet citizens were fond of Gorby. They accepted its shortcomings with a sense of understanding. It was not seen as a joke, unlike, for example, the AMC Gremlin in the United States. In fact, the Zaporozhets performed well on poor rural roads. Its ground clearance, fully independent suspension, and high rear-wheel load, nearly 60%, gave it surprising off-road capabilities. Although the designers, or technical artists, as they were called in the USSR, received minimal technical specifications, the task was simply to create a utilitarian mass-market vehicle without any frills. Despite that, the Gorby turned out to have a rather cute and well-balanced appearance. The interior of the Zaporozhets was pure minimalism. Behind the steering wheel were a few basic gauges. To the right, the ignition, a few control buttons, a heater, and a radio. However, the cabin lacked proper sound insulation. The engine, located directly behind the rear seat, was extremely noisy and, in summer, noticeably heated up the passenger compartment. Yet the Zaporozhets had some unexpected advantages. For instance, engine access took just a few seconds. Just lift the rear hatch. Because of this, many owners repaired their cars themselves, and a grassroots community of ZAZ enthusiasts soon emerged across the USSR. They traded parts, shared advice, and even carried out homegrown modifications. In addition, Gorby owners weren't afraid to take their little car on long road trips, often covering thousands of kilometers. For example, from Moscow to Crimea or from Kiev to the Caucasus. It became a unique kind of vacation available only to Soviet car owners, a distinctly Soviet take on road trip culture.
О, консервная банка системы Zaporozhets.
Новой марки?
Старье.
At some point, the Soviet leadership decided that the domestic market wasn't enough for the Gorby and made an attempt to bring it to the global market. The model was renamed Yalta, a more pleasant-sounding name for export, and received a slightly upgraded interior, extra chrome trim on the body, and generally better build quality. The Yalta was offered in several European countries, as well as in North America, and even its strongest market was Eastern Europe, where buyers appreciated its simplicity and affordability. In the rest of the world, it remained a curious oddity, attracting only niche interest. Interestingly, it is now the Yalta version that is considered the most valuable among collectors. Only about 15,000 units were ever produced, making it a rare find compared to the total production run of 322,116 standard Gorby. Fiat, for its part, never protested. Instead of pursuing legal action over design similarities, the Italian automaker simply chose to ignore the Soviet car. At the time, patent enforcement was far looser than it is today, and the Zaporozhets' export numbers were insignificant compared to Fiat's massive production scale in Europe. Among the more interesting modifications of the Gorby were, of course, the versions equipped with hand controls for people with disabilities. There's already a video on this channel about the Serpukhov automobile plant, which specialized in manufacturing disability vehicles. If you haven't seen it yet, be sure to check it out. But it wasn't just SMZ producing such cars. The Zaporozhzhia plant also made hand-controlled versions of the ZAZ-965 in several configurations, for people with one leg, both legs, or even one leg and one arm missing. Unlike the SMZ microcars, which were loaned to disabled individuals free of charge, but had to be returned after a set period, the hand-controlled ZAZ 965 was provided free of charge and didn't need to be returned. This made it a much more attractive option, offering more power, better comfort, and improved safety over the small three-wheeled microcars. As for the standard Gorby, it remained in production until 1969. Throughout its time on the assembly line, the car saw very few changes. By the mid-60s, its design was already considered outdated and lacking future potential. So the factory shifted its focus to developing an entirely new model. Despite all its flaws and imperfections, the Gorby has gained a cult following. The few surviving examples are now sought after by collectors and can fetch a surprisingly high price. Yes, It became the subject of countless jokes, but most of them were kind-hearted and warm, more ironic than cruel, and often filled with nostalgic affection.